Here we go with the third set of slides for evaluation, the final part of the course here. And after we're talking about the philosophy of science a bit, we're going to look at different methodological approaches that we use to apply our understanding of our nature of reality. And so here we go with this kind of methodological approaches and the relevance given public policies. And so you can think about these kind of competing different worldviews, right? The perspective of positivism says that we have this kind of objective understanding of the world. We can discover reality and actually understand what is real. And you see a policy example here: EPA emissions standard modeling. Post-positivism is builds on positivism, but says that sure, we can try to attempt to understand reality, but that knowledge is uncertain, right? So we use things like peer review and understanding that biases can impact how we view things. Constructivism, what we've talked about so many different times in this course, is that our reality is socially constructed, right? And it's not really objective, it is subjective. Critical theory understands that knowledge is intertwined with power. And symbolic interactionism means that a meaning arises in our interactions. And so you can look at different policy examples for each of these and how kind of the perspective and the claim about our knowledge leads to different types of public policies. So positivism. This is kind of what you think about the lab coat scientist, right? You have this value-free, detached observer just doing straight up science, testing and retesting hypotheses to make reproducible results, replicable tests. We can look at the benefit of this when it comes to regulatory. Cost-benefit analysis often follows in this kind of sense of positivism. Post-positivism means that science is imperfect, and people often introduce some sort of bias into their understanding of the world. And our models are uncertain, right? We can't really know truth. And so this approach emphasizes falsification and paradigm shifts. And so we have these kind of iterative steps to truth, but we never really fully get there. Vocabulary word around that is verisimility. And so we often try to use mixed methods, like we discussed in the first set of evaluation slides, right? Where we're coming at it from a qualitative perspective and a quantitative perspective and trying to triangulate our results to get a deeper understanding. Constructivism is trying to make sense of our world. We recognize that there are multiple legitimate realities. People understand the world differently. And so how we collect data and understand these things is through focus groups, participatory action research, and interviews. And so this is really useful when the policy's success depends on how people perceive perceive the problem, perceive the solution, right? The things that we've discussed for the past several weeks in this course. Critical theory means that there are hidden power structures that are built into the understanding of reality. And so we seek to emancipate ourselves from those hidden structures and try to figure out the best way to engage in the research from a moral sense. And symbolic interactionism mean that policy meetings are negotiated, right? That the way that the street level bureaucrat interacts with the person, the target of the public policy, that's an interaction, right? And that meaning of how the policy is implemented is determined there at that micro level. And we can get at this through ethnography, through discourse analysis. And so if we're going to kind of link these methods to public policy, we can look at the policy stage, the tool from a positivist standpoint or a constructivist standpoint. So the choice of paradigm changes the questions you ask and the evidence that you see, right? Problem definition, positivist tool, trend analysis. Problem definition, constructivist tool, community storytelling. And so you see how for each of these different levels, these different stages, definition, policy formulation, implementation, evaluation, your kind of method that you approach the world, your understanding of what is real depends, it can adjust which tool that you actually apply. So I love this quote by Hugh Hecla. Public policy is this kind of collective puzzlement on society's behalf, right? So we're really trying to get at how do people understand the situation, right? We have very different paradigms, multiple lenses to view the puzzles that we have. Democratic governance needs these different perspectives, right? So we need people to come at things from a critical perspective. We need people to come at things trying to understand how people perceive problems. And we need to use best we can achieve to some sort of a sense of objective science when it comes to solving our problems. The problem definition, like I've said so many times, is going to shape the solutions that we have. So your data plus the frame that you use leads to the agenda, the alternatives, and the outcomes. So however you do it, whenever you're engaging in policy analysis, whenever you're engaging in community stakeholder meetings, whatever you do for your work around public policy, be explicit about your assumptions. Be explicit about how you perceive the world, and match the methods to the questions and the values to the context. Good policy science, really trying to understand how to do all of this, is rigorous and reflexive, right? So you're building in these kind of sense of pulling from multiple kind of methods in the toolbox to really get at public policy problems. All right, so that's it for this one. We got one more set in the evaluation lectures, so come back.